Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. I'm Leah, the Research Manager at Daksh. Today, we will be launching the Daksh Center of Excellence for Law and Technologies report on a UI and UX evaluation of 6 High Court websites. Websites, as all of you know, are a window to an organization. This is especially true for arms and agencies of the state. With growing internet penetration, citizens are increasingly dependent on websites to give them clear and up-to-date information. Various stakeholders such as lawyers, litigants, and researchers use court websites, and thus the UI and UX of such websites can have a significant impact on their digital experience. Such websites need to be accessible and usable regardless of the end user's linguistic skills, tech savviness, disability status, or location. The Daksh Center of Excellence for Law and Technology undertook this study to understand how the websites of 6 of our high courts fared in facilitating access to up-to-date and useful information to citizens in an intuitive and accessible way. Today, we are privileged to have as our chief guest Justice Ravinder Bhatt. Justice Bhatt studied law and completed his LLB from Campus Law Center, University of Delhi in 1982. He was enrolled as an advocate with the Delhi Bar Council in 1982 and practiced in the Supreme Court, where he was an advocate on record. As a lawyer, Justice Bhatt practiced in public law, employment, education, and constitutional disputes. He was appointed as an additional judge in the Delhi High Court in 2004 and as a permanent judge in 2006. He was appointed as the Chief Justice in the High Court of Rajasthan in May 2019 and elevated as a judge of the Supreme Court in September 2019. In his judicial career, Justice Bhatt has delivered many important judgments. The notable ones being about the obligation of the Supreme Court and High Court judges to declare their personal assets to the Chief Justice and their coverage under the RTI Act, as well as judgments in diverse branches of civil law, such as the right to let in DNA evidence in paternity suits, public interest in pharmaceutical patents, liability of internet intermediaries, trademark dilution, capital sentencing, etc. Justice Bhatt was the first High Court judge in the country to preside over a paperless or e-court. He has presented papers on intellectual property right laws and attended international conferences, including at the World Trade Organization and most recently at the Deakin Law School Conference on Law and Technology. He was also a member of the Justice B.N. Sri Krishna Committee on Arbitration Reforms. In the Supreme Court, he has authored constitutional bench judgments on the importance of anticipatory bail and personal freedom, the idea of fraternity in concurring judgments, and the interpretation of Article 342A of the Constitution. He has also authored a recent judgment underlining the criticality of the independence of the judiciary in the context of tribunalization. We will begin today's launch with welcome remarks by the director of IIT Delhi, Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao. Before joining IIT Delhi as a director in April 2016, Dr. Rao had served as the P.K. Kelkar Chair, Professor for Nanotechnology in the Department of Electrical Engineering, and as the Chief Investigator for the COE for Nanotechnology at IIT Bombay. Dr. Rao has over 475 research publications in the area of nanoscale devices and nanoelectronics, and is an inventor on 48 patents and patent applications. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. At the outset, I would like to thank Justice Ravindra Bhatt for joining us. Thank you very much, sir, for taking time to be with us on this occasion. In fact, IIT Delhi, as we were also discussing with you last time when you were here, we are now getting into law and technology kind of areas to some extent. We have signed an MOU with the National Law University, and as part of that MOU, we are also funding our faculty. NLU is funding their faculty and we are funding our faculty to collaborate with each other. Or close to a dozen projects we have been able to initiate now between IIT Delhi faculty and NLU faculty, which is something that is happening right now. And also, as you were there last time, we are initiating major activities with the Universal Justice Foundation. So that's also something that we are on the are beginning to happen now. Those collaborations with Daksh Society, it's over a year old now. So there are a lot of interesting initiatives that have begun jointly with Daksh, And in fact, Professor Nomesh Bolia is coordinating all of these activities which involve law and justice, law and technology. So we are honored by your presence. We need your guidance. I think left to ourselves, we might do something, but I think eventually it has to be useful to people like you. And I think with your under your guidance and leadership, if we can carry out some activities which the community can make use of, I think we would consider all our efforts fruitful. And thanks a lot for helping us guide in these activities. Thank you. Yeah, Professor Bolia.
Yes, Leah, do you want to take over?
Yeah, Justice Bhatt, we request you to give your opening remarks.
Good evening, Professor Ramgopal Rao, Director IIT, Professor Nomesh Bolia, Mr. Surya Prakash, Professor Anisha Sharma, Leah Verghese, distinguished guests and friends. It's a pleasant task to be here virtually at the launch of the UI UX Evaluation of High Court website report prepared by the IIT in collaboration with Daksh. The Constitution of India commands that court proceedings are to be open. Openness in court proceedings has many connotations. The most obvious one is that unlike other departments of the state, its proceedings are visible to all, or at least those wishing to witness it. This is part of the assurance of open justice and guarantee of equality to litigants before the courts. Today there is a robust dialogue, and a very live one, for live streaming of court proceedings. But we are not concerned today with live proceedings or live streaming of proceedings. At another level, given that most common people are befuddled by court procedures and can be lost in its maze, it is crucial that there is a digital interface to connect the people with the court. One of the most often refrains which lawyers use is that ignorance of the law is no excuse. Now, what do you do when the law's processes are layered in language which is not usually comprehensible and its procedures are very puzzling? So, I think this is where technology has stepped in. Uh, Websites, court websites, and now we have not just high court websites, we have every district has as part of the e-court initiative, you have the e-courts project which inaugurated websites of all the district courts. Now much depends on the maintenance of these websites. The inauguration and maintenance of the national judicial data grid and the court websites at even the district level has ensured that people can access for certain basic information with respect to the kind of cases, the daily orders made there. They don't have to travel long distances to get in touch with their lawyers or even visit court premises to find out what has happened. If it's adjourned, as many cases usually are, or some order has been made, to find out. Most of the time, people used to be dependent on their lawyers or other information providers at the local level, people known to them, friends or whoever, to, as we say in Hindi, to provide pairvi, which means that somebody would reach the court, follow what was happening, and then report back to the concerned litigant. So this entailed enormous amount of effort, follow-up, and time. That has been cut short through court websites. Now court websites, especially high court websites, and in many cases, in many states, state district court websites uh, are very comprehensive. Generally, court websites, especially in the high courts, have been around for the last 10 years or so. Early websites provided information such as basic information such as cause lists, information with respect to cause list would mean what item, how many items are listed before which judge, what would be the courtroom, and so on and so forth. Or availability of certified copies of orders, daily orders, next date, and so on and so forth. As time went by, websites grew more informative with access to full texts of judgments in PDF form, information relating to jurisdiction, disposal of cases, and so on and so forth. Uh, my parent High Court has been the Delhi High Court, and I remember a lot of thought used to go on the maintenance of these websites and the services which could be provided. Uh, in fact, the Delhi High Court and maybe later other high courts have come out with a lot of information which includes a complete and detailed step-by-step explanation of procedures, putting out forms to the public, facilities that are available such as legal services, mediations, etc., recruitment of personnel, that is staff in the courts, so on and so forth, uh, information about orders, judgments, certified copies, notices, and so on, which is usual. And there are some parts of the website which make it open for you to even access in a limited manner library services. Then, very importantly, there are FAQs which uh, take you through which handhold you to through a various a number of questions which no ordinary litigants would have. Now, this I believe has revolutionized uh, the footfalls, the number of footfalls, at least in the courts in Delhi. We used to experience something like 15, 20,000, uh, footfalls uh, maybe 7, 8 years ago, but that's come down quite a lot because of access to these websites. I remember about 6 or 7 years ago, there was a news item saying that the Delhi High Court website was the second most visited, website in the National Capital Territory. So that says a lot. I believe now it has reached a higher level of sophistication. Not just websites, we have email, SMS alerts, and I don't say that this is only confined to Delhi. Many other states have come out with their own unique, features, and some high courts have probably even Delhi have come out with apps. So it's possible real time to track what items are going on, but by just clicking on the app on your cell phone. Now, with this, I would commend this initiative of trying to make an objective audit of various websites. I asked for a copy, but I must confess that I have not been able to read it to the extent that I normally would be happy to. Which means, but at the same time, whatever I did find that there are at least in one chapter that I saw that there were 10 parameters which the researchers collected data from. That the kind of access, how fast it is, how easy was and comprehensible was the language, and the layers of obfuscation, so I say, so to say, which they might face, and so on and so forth. So the parameters sound good, but at the same time, I must sound one small note of caution. I note that at some stage, not just at some stage, at different stages you have mentioned in the report about the users who were contacted. Now, being a a report based on statistical sample, I would be comfortable. I would frankly say that I would be comfortable if the sample sizes are larger. And you're looking at 6 high courts, and there are which service a large number of people, especially Madhya Pradesh or maybe other websites. So you're looking at a large number of websites, a large number of people who might be accessing, and you would definitely have information about the number of people who have visited these websites on a daily basis. Now, this is not hard to come by. All of you know that. Such being the case, if you actually scale down the information and analyze it based on a sampler of 22, as I saw in relation to some of these parameters, or even 200, I think the results could be distorted. So I would say that this is the only caveat that I would add to this report, which otherwise is very nicely conceived. Perhaps it is important that you have one sample size, a larger one. I mean, you know how many people visit on an average each website. So, and then you come out with a mean. Otherwise, what could happen is with a small sampler, you would get perhaps a large number of outliers. So that's the danger. So I'm not a statistical expert, but as a layperson I can say this, and having been involved in a couple of reports, one of which was also with the assistance of Daksh, I would certainly say that it's important to have a steady and sufficiently large sampler. But that said, I would say whatever sampling methods have been, I mean, whatever methods have been used, the to capture the data and draw the conclusions, seem perfectly all right. Uh, as far as I can see, you have not left out much. Uh, I think it's also important that we involved in court administration should realize the full potential of these websites, and for that it's one of the methods would be these reports, which should of course be put out wherever. Not on, of course, these high courts are per se not involved, but if the high courts are involved, there would be a necessity of putting it out in the high court website itself. And the second thing is, this kind of report can lead to a involvement of the larger general public. I always felt strongly that in the running of these websites, or even for some of the public services, there has to be engagement from the users. There has to be user participation. Um, I've read somewhere, for instance, that in the UK, in these kind of user services, there is usually a user participation or a user interface in terms of a day-to-day involvement. Like these days, you have uh, an editor from amongst readers in many of the newspapers. So that kind of user interface is important, because ultimately the people who are getting benefits or accessing these websites are the users of the courts. From the service angle, we are service providers, they are the service recipients. So it's important to involve them and not just us in the maintenance of these websites. So to alert us about these possibilities, we need these reports. And with that, I would end and say congratulations, and I wish all the best to this report and all future endeavors of the IIT in collaboration with Daksh in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Bhatt, for those remarks. Very enlightening, very interesting to hear about, the history of the court websites, which some of us are not familiar with. I now invite Professor Romesh Bolia, who's the coordinator of the Daksh Center for Excellence, to present an overview of the report itself. He will be joined by Jaimin and Mansi, who helped with the research and the writing of the report. Over to you, Romesh.
Okay. Thank you. So at the outset, let me express my gratitude to Justice Ravindra Bhatt for having joined us in this important occasion. It's important for us because this is the first project that we have concluded as a part of the Center of Excellence, which was established together with the support of the Daksh Society in Bengaluru. Thank you, Professor Rao, for making time available here to join. I would also like to credit Jaimin, who has graduated with his master's, and Mansi, who is currently a PhD student at IIT Delhi, for giving us their inputs and helping us draft the report. So I'll move on to sharing my screen so that I can talk about the report. Yeah, so Leah, my screen is visible, right?
It is. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is the project that we undertook, the first project at the center. Almost as soon as the project started, the Center of Excellence started in October 2020. We thought this would be an interesting take. This actually came from some informal conversations that Daksh had with a judge of a high court. It is being done, as you can see, as a part of the projects at the Daksh Center of Excellence for Law and Technology at IIT Delhi. Uh, so what I'm going to talk about today is, the overall approach and the importance of evaluating website, why we took up this project. I will talk about the specific problem statement, the methodology, and Justice Bird, thanks a lot for pointing out some of your concerns and caveats in terms of the sample size, and we will put forth here how the sample size was arrived at and why it is different. We will talk about the implementation, the survey responses and statistics, the results that we got, and finally some suggestions and recommendations based on this entire project. The importance, all of us know, Justice Bhatt has very eloquently pointed out that advancement in technology has made courts also, of course, take notice of that. And it is imperative for public to have easy access to all information, but specifically in our context, information about the judiciary. COVID-19 has actually, further accentuated the whole need. In fact, we have even had virtual hearings now, and so definitely websites are important. They play an important role in access to justice, and therefore evaluating and auditing them the way Justice Bhatt described, I think is a great idea. We also felt that there is a great scope, and that's why the Center of Excellence exists for independent research and collaboration with various organizations, specifically with IIT. And we felt this was one project that can be done quickly, that can have some findings that can potentially be put to use, some low hanging fruits also, as I will talk about in the report. And so we thought of this project. The formulation exactly is user interface and user experience, the so-called UI UX evaluation of select high courts of India. These high courts are Delhi, MP, Bombay, Karnataka, Calcutta, and Madras. So the way we've selected them is that they're big high courts and they're spread all over the country. So north, east, west, south, sort of everything is covered. And then, of course, I will talk about the suggestions and recommendations based on the survey using the entire study. So the problem statement I've already talked about. This is aimed at producing a holistic evaluation. So what we are saying here is we will do this evaluation in sort of 3 stages. We really wanted to have as rigorous a process as possible. The first stage is doing a user experience test. As a part of this phase, we had a response of about 600 people looking at the 6 high court websites in a fairly well structured sort of survey form where we asked them questions on a variety of questions. I will get into more details later. What this does, it gives us an idea of what casual sort of users of the website, what do they feel about it, and what are some of the key ideas and key problems that they might face, so that we can focus on them in the next step, which is the task-based usability test. What we did here is, instead of casually visiting website and asking them questions on how you felt about the aesthetics or the ease of use, etc., we actually asked them to perform some tasks that people who frequently visit these websites would indulge in. So this was a fairly involved survey. It would have taken, I think, 22 users, and I will talk about that later in the presentation, cutting across all kinds of backgrounds, were asked to sort of perform these tasks on each of the 6 high court websites. performing tasks on every high court would have taken them, tens of hours. And so every user, we are talking about spending multiple days to sort of conduct these tasks. And then we, asked a bunch of questions which helped us analyze various measures with respect to these tasks. I will come to all of that when we go on. So the first user experience test was conducted in a sample size of 600. And I think if the pandemic was not there, we probably would have gotten a better response. But yes, this probably can go higher. The task-based usability test was much more detailed, and that was conducted in a sort of controlled sense among 22 users. And then finally, based on both of these, we evaluated what the standard principles of having a website are. There are 10 interaction design principles given by Jacob Nielsen, who's a well-known authority in this field. And based on getting inputs from the literature and the above two tests, we ourselves conducted a heuristic evaluation based on multiple questions on how each of these code websites performs on those questions to get a sort of quantitative idea as well of where the code websites stand. We also did, a comparison that is straightforward with Google now about the loading speed. And finally, there are some suggestions. So, I must say at the outset that it's a mixed result. There are some places where we felt that the scores, would be much lower, but they did not actually. I mean, so the websites were performing well. There are some low-hanging fruits which I will talk about, and then there are some, things that we really need to do to make the experience of the users a little better. So the survey response statistics, we had 600 plus responses from people all over the country. We made sure that this is geographically distributed, so there are 20 plus states. We made sure that the users are diverse, so 42% of the respondents were female, 27% of the respondents were from a rural area, 13% of the responses were old. And when I myself will count, in this category of old. This was greater than age of 40. So 13%, we were fortunate to find such people also in the survey. More than 30 plus questions were asked of these people and they were analyzed. And there were about 30% of these who were just first-time users, only to get a sense of what a first-time user thinks about when they visit a website. The results are interesting. So this is just a snapshot. The details are all available in the report. One of the questions that we asked, for example, is among the first few questions, when you visit the website, do you feel it is something cool? Do you think it is prestigious enough to be the website of an Indian high court? Because people do look at high courts with some, some sort of status and prestige. 22% people actually said, no, it doesn't look as good as a high court website should probably be. 44% people said that, people, they use this website for purposes around judgments and orders. So this gave us an input on analyzing this in a little more detail in the task-based usability test. 11% of the people only said that they were extremely satisfied with the website loading speed. Although the story here is much better actually than this figure itself suggests. Respondents were not really sure of getting required information on the websites, 46%. The remaining 54% felt they were able to get it. 37% of the respondents were not satisfied with the availability of contact information on the website. So this we felt is a really low-hanging fruit. This is easily done, and this can immediately be taken up. And all detailed suggestions on which high courts can do better is all available in the report. 52% respondents couldn't find a sitemap on the websites. And so again, I think this is a quick low-hanging fruit. Making sitemap at a prominent location is something that is easily done. We went on next to doing a more detailed, among 22 people, task-based usability test. This is a standard framework that is used by UX evaluation. So 10 tasks were performed, and these tasks look like these. So they were asked to download case summary, they were asked to download cause list, judgments and orders, they were asked to download latest notification, latest circular, retrieve contact information, download the court calendar, get the contact information, download latest general notice. These sort of cover all the four sort of broad dimensions that courts work in. 22 people whose background was technical, non-technical, people who had some background with judicial services, people such as lawyers and researchers. So this was a mix of all kinds of people. More than 60 plus questions were analyzed for various measures. So we wanted to know whether they were able to complete the task or not, whether they, what is the task completion time, what is the number of clicks, how difficult was it in finding the relevant section, and so on. So it's a detailed analysis of each of these things, all of which is present in the report. And to make sure they understand everything properly, this is a part of standard protocol. We had one orientation of all these 22 users, detailed describing them how they should be looking at these tasks, and then active engagement in the form of 2 phone calls through their about 15 days to 21 days of engagement with the task-based usability test. So the results, again, the details are all available. Out of 22, these were some highlights that I thought I should talk about here. 5 and 3 people, respectively, in MP and Bombay, could not find cause case information and cause list respectively. So this, we feel, I think this is probably the main reason why the websites exist, at least for the people who are litigants. And only 5 and 3 respectively out of 22 were able to find in MP and Bombay. The others were better. Only 5 out of 10 tasks were completed by most of the people across the High Court websites. Only 1 and 1 for Calcutta and MP High Court could get the RTI officer information on the website. So this, again, is the worst for Calcutta and MP. Although not saying that MP is the worst or anything like that, but this is just a low-hanging fruit that can immediately be plugged. 32% respondents talked about navigation efficiency did not meet their expectations. So I think this is something where more detailed thought has to go, and our report does give some directions. This is the range of respondents from 9 to 54%. The lowest was Karnataka, highest was Madras, who were not satisfied with finding overall the required information on the website. And about 40% respondents were not happy with the help and documentation provided on the websites. So this does not mean that all courts were performing bad or anything like that. This is just specific information with respect to specific courts. Then, like I said, we conducted a detailed heuristic evaluation based on Jacob Nielsen interaction design principles. More than 135 questions were identified from standard literature in this area, and based on our own survey, we normalized the scores, conducted an analysis, and the results are as follows. This was a detailed evaluation. For example, for visibility of system status, this is one interaction design principle. This is the list of questions that we analyzed for each of these websites, and we noted down. So is a site map given on the homepage of the website, for example, we noted down whether each of these high courts actually have that. So the ones that have, we mentioned yes, and they got a score of 1. The ones that did not have got no, and therefore a score of 0, and so on and so forth for each of these parameters for one interaction design principle. We repeated the exercise for all the 10 interaction design principles, and this sort of covers all the key things that are important for UI UX. The worst performing were flexibility and efficiency of use, where the maximum score that they could get was 8, and they could only score 2.75, 2.25. So the best itself was just 2.75 out of 8. So some, thought needs to go in improving the navigation efficiency. This is just, again, these details are there. This presents a summary of how each of the IDP performed. So here we can see, for example, that the IDP 7, which refers to flexibility and efficiency, is the lowest, and some of these are among the best, actually. So they perform more than 70% across each of the high courts. There are some details on how individual courts perform, which IDPs of they are best on, and so on and so forth. We performed a comparison of website speed, and turns out Delhi High Court has the highest speed. The benchmark is Facebook and Google. Blue represents desktop, red represents mobile. And so they are not, we expected here that they might not perform as well, but except for Bombay, very surprisingly, and Calcutta, the other high courts were pretty good in terms of website speed. So that is the overall summary. So overall suggestions, all details with respect to each specific item are there in the report. But overall summary in terms of suggestions is that the case data retrieval sections, they need to be made more user-friendly and more efficient. Search features on the website can be improved with autofill search box on the top right corner for prominent visibility. Low-hanging fruit is contact information of RTI officers and other type of contact information. Clubbing of different sections should be rethought for better navigation efficiency, and some of our findings can give hints to doing that. And the aesthetics and design can be improved, but I think this is sort of subjective. This can be done with sort of more user engagement, the way Justice Bhatt described in his initial remarks. The future scope to carry this forward, we would like to do this evaluation for more high courts, and maybe, if possible, if we are given the access, taking some of the recommendations and maybe even working with some of the high courts to make it even more useful, as Professor Rao described. And maybe if there is further interest in the judiciary, we could actually use some of these things and pilot some of these findings in the courts in terms of implementing some of these suggestions that have come on the basis of this report. So that's all that I wanted to share. Thank you so much for your attention. I know this was a little rushed up, But the report, although the detailed report is very long, but there is a nice executive summary and the main part, which is just 23, 24 pages odd. And I encourage all of you to read it and do get back to us with more suggestions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nomesh. That was a very brief but informative presentation. For the audience members, I hope the presentation has piqued your interest in reading the report, which, as Nomesh mentioned, will be available on the COE website. Now I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel. Just our panelists today are Justice Ravindra Bhatt and Professor Anisha Sharma. Professor Anisha Sharma has more than 21 years of experience in the field of design, with 8 years of teaching experience in varied design institutes. She is deeply interested in design education and creativity research. Dr. Anisha Sharma has received her PhD in design from IDC IIT Bombay and has worked at NID, where she headed the Department of Information Design and taught service design and systems design. She has taught UX and UI design and communication design at Srishti's Institute of Art Design and Technology and the Symbiosis Institute of Design. She has done several national and international consultancy projects in the area of user experience as well as strategic branding. The panel discussion will be moderated by Surya Prakash BS, who's the program director at Daksh. Surya is a chartered accountant and lawyer with more than 14 years of experience in handling tax functions of global IT companies. Over to you, Surya.
Thank you, Leah. I can't see Anisha on the panel. Yes, here she is. Thank you, Justice Bhatt, for sparing time and your kind, gracious words. Very speaking remarks, and Professor Ram Gopal Rao, Director of IIT Delhi, for allowing us and helping us with all the work at the center that we have done and we plan to do. Thank you, Dr. Anisha Sharma, for being a part of this discussion, and we hope while the report has covered some parts of it, there is much that is yet to be explored in this area, and I hope to go in this discussion, which will be for about 30 minutes, to go into further areas of research or what more could be done in this area. So, Justice Bhatt, sir, in your opening remarks, you captured so well the experience at the Delhi High Court on how the footfalls at the High Court. I'm so glad that those numbers you had to back up the claim that this footfall decreased because of the accessibility of information. And this is a question I will ask both of you. Most High Court websites, people would think that these are for the advocates or their office staff. These are regular users. So, and when you're trying to access information, refreshing the browser throughout the day, really, what is the need to think about design thinking when you have such frequency of usage by a small group of people? So you have covered some aspect of that, Justice Bhatt. If you could please share your thoughts on why this is an important area for judicial websites in general. Judicial apps, of course, are another category, but the principles will hold, sir. Sir, you may need to unmute yourselves.
I forgot that. Sorry. Websites are a kind of a window into the functioning of the organization. Apart from the current talk on live streaming, we also have the obligation under the RTI Act. So under Section 4, there's a general obligation by every organization to put out to the people, to the general public, whatever can be put out and ought to be put out, except the exceptions which are actually set out in Section 8. So I would assume that much of the court's functions, though not records, are capable of being put out. However, there are certain areas, like for instance, in ongoing litigation. In ongoing litigation, there is always confidentiality in the sense that about the documents, about the pleadings of the parties, etc. So that can attach even to live streaming of certain types of proceedings, especially criminal proceedings or ongoing civil proceedings, which are of private nature. Now, abroad, a lot of thought has gone into it. For instance, when it comes to criminal trials, even tweeting and live reporting is prohibited in England, and therefore, because there is a sensitivity attached to it, because people's lives and reputations are at stake. So, while embracing technology, a lot of this has to be factored in. Likewise, when you're dealing with juveniles, you're dealing with a rape victim, etc. So there's a bit of sensitivity, and the courts have written judgments also trying to anonymize the identities of these people. So those sensitivities are equally important when it comes to matters of the court, whether it's live streaming or putting out judgments, etc. Most courts take care of it. But coming to what is accessible, I think there is no limit to it. That the only limit could be the bandwidth, perhaps, because as you mentioned, and I think there is a section on captcha. The whole point is the number of times that these websites are visited makes the bandwidth. There's a big problem at times. You have to constantly refresh it. Sometimes the documents don't load. You're not able to get orders which are very long, or simply that it's not accessible because of the volume of traffic. So
Right.
I think that may have something to do with website design, but certainly it has something to do with bandwidth. Now that is an area which perhaps we can't do anything except that the courts have to get a wider bandwidth and a more stable one. But when it comes to the design, I think this is something, it's always a work in progress. It cannot end. And that's why I recommended, that we must have a user interface in terms of whether it's litigants or lawyers who constantly give feedbacks that this is what is happening. And I remember, I mean, this is not related to this, but there have been, cyber attacks on court websites also. I remember it happened to the Delhi High Court. It happened again, I think, to the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court too. So issues concerning security, firewalling and providing proper security to these websites, and the kind of transparency that you have, because you have to be take a lot of precautions to ensure that these networks are not related to each other or linked, so that the courts networks are not infected. They do take a lot of precaution, as I think Mr. Surya Prakash is aware, and yet you can't be too sure about these things.
Right.
But coming back to what can be done, I think the opportunities are almost endless. If one goes by the experience of the national judicial data grid, which is seldom talked about, and which needs to be actually carefully looked at, maybe there are issues concerning its design or perhaps maintenance, but it's a great concept, and people from all over the country can actually access it. You can get information about a particular proceeding which is taking place in a remote corner in West Bengal. And my office, we often do that. Some cases which come up, we just to get a status reality check, you go to the court website. Right. So a check on those websites is also very important, because that will inform the public or inform the concerned decision makers about the steps to be taken to improve the functioning of those websites. Okay. So what you are doing about high courts perhaps is as important or more important when it comes to district courts. You have large states like UP, and some of those districts are very large, and the accessibility of, and in remote areas, for instance, in hill states. So these services become very, very crucial,
Yeah.
assuming, of course, that there is connectivity, because
Connectivity.
that's another challenge.
Right.
So the digital footprint is equally important, but one has to assume that all this is possible. If you assume that
Exactly.
this is possible, then you have to constantly look and revise and refine whatever services can be provided.
Correct, sir. So, in fact, sir, this was the idea for such an evaluation study came up when Daksh, along with the other organizations, we were working on the vision document for phase 3, and in many of the interactions, many judges told us, somebody needs to tell us how good our websites are. And in particular, Justice Gautam Patel of Bombay High Court, he told in an open meeting, somebody should audit these websites. And that was the seed when we started discussing with Nomesh. And I'm so happy that we now have a full-fledged study that we could replicate over time to other websites and at different points of time and expand the scope as we go along. Professor Anisha Sharma, as a design study expert, why should design, when you have such a small group of people who repeatedly use this website, why do you think design is important? What principles should drive it? You're on mute, Professor Sharma.
Sorry again. No, I was saying that the judicial system is very vast and it has multiple stakeholders who are putting in information onto the website. On the other hand, there are a gamut of users who are using it, and actually there is a hierarchy of users. The most frequent ones being the lawyers, as you mentioned. However, but they are not the only ones. There are others as well who are accessing this information. And actually, even if the highest number, as you say, is lawyers, design is required. It is just because that they are using it frequently. Are they used to a bad design? Or would we be able to design it better to make it easier for them, make them more productive? So I think design, one should look at the user, look at what journey he goes through while he's trying to accomplish a task, and find out the finer issues that are there and resolve them. And then I think the actual experience of the user will become pretty smoother and good.
Right, right. So when you're designing something for, like how you said, a hierarchy of users, or if I could take a horizontal view, a variety of users, a wide variety of users, right? Or metro, rural areas, people with regional language requirements or special needs, right? How should design, is it possible to design something that can meet all of the requirements, or how would you go about it? What do we know? What can we learn from other fields in this, other areas where such design thinking has been deployed?
So actually, if you see any design or any website or UI should be very intuitive. I shouldn't have to tell the user how to use it. Well, I shouldn't have to show the user where the sitemap is. When you go to Google, you don't look for a sitemap. You don't look for, if you look at Amazon, you don't look at the sitemap. You don't look for how do I do these things. You just intuitively do it. And that kind of design is always helpful. It takes a lot of amount of research. The user research that is done is of a very high amount, and the insights gained out of them are extremely dense, and hence you are able to resolve these problems and create a proper system. So if you put some systems thinking or systems approach to this, I think it will be very easy to come up with the problems that are there, and then we can sit and resolve it. Because identifying the problem is also a big task. We may feel that right now the number of people who are illiterate are unable to use this, and hence we should do something. But that is not the only problem. It might be that they need to, if I think about a website like a government website, so passport, earlier we used to have to go through the agents to get a passport. Now I can do it on my own. because there is, so the passport website is no longer passive information. It is interactive, like Justice Bhatt mentioned that there needs to be a user interface. Yeah, it just cannot be passive information which the user is digesting. The user also needs to put in. So there should be an two-way dialogue happening within the design so that the experience becomes smooth.
Right. So that's a fantastic comment that you make, and something that I read recently, that talking to humans talking to computers or machines, people now expect that it be as simple as talking to another humans. It is almost a social interaction. So there is a politeness expected. There's an expectation that they know something about you. That they know what you know, and that they know what you don't know. So it's a social conversation. The norms of a polite social conversation is now expected between machines and humans too. And you made that point so well. Before I go to Justice Bhatt on one thing, because you make that point about intuitiveness and it needs thinking, is this thinking about the user interface and user experience for Indian judiciary in particular, but larger government services or services of the state, is that, are we expecting too much? We are a mid-income country, right? Are we having high-income country expectations? Is it a very costly job? Is it something, a budget limitation that is holding us back? What do you think is holding back such kind of a change?
Actually, I don't think it is about a developed country or a developing country. It is just about using design and design principles while you are actually making the interfaces or interactions which are digital in nature. So actually, if you think about it, we are all interfacing with the computer and the screen on a very regular basis. And hence, it is important that we actually streamline how we are interacting and how intuitively we are providing to the user, so that he's able to find and navigate himself through the different parts of the websites very nicely.
Right. So it's more about the imagination and the application of that thinking to the situation, rather than budget constraints that is holding us back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Justice Bhatt, on that note, what do you think? What further information do you think users of the court websites would benefit from? You did mention the variety of information that the courts are already providing, and the Delhi High Court in particular has provided. To my mind, sir, from when somebody has entered the courts as a litigant, they would want to know when it is going to get over. So just as an idea, and I would refer to you, do you think something like, what are the next steps till the judgment or order? Some visibility on what the next steps would be in this case. Would that give more comfort to the litigants? Any other suggestions that you think would make this high court websites and judicial websites more useful to litigants, sir, generally speaking?
You see, Professor Sharma spoke about design and the importance of design. And she's completely right there, because you're not looking only at a small catchment of lawyers who are going to access websites. You can't start and end on that assumption. It is meant for the larger litigant public. And if you go deep into it, you'll actually discover. We did so about 3-4 years ago. Every district, has a legal services authority. So somewhere in the year 2019, we had a kind of a digital digitally enabled services through video conferencing, real time in every district. So this made it possible for those unfamiliar or hesitant users of websites to actually access their lawyers or just get information by walking into those district centers, legal services authorities, which would then some there was always a lawyer almost on a full-time basis,
Full-time.
of course, uh, paid an honorarium. They would be there available on call. Some would be attending on literally on calls, phone calls, phone in kind of thing. Others would be attended to through video conferencing. So you could just log in, ask them the information, and it would be given to you. And that's another kind of use of these websites. So the kind of web users is not something you can actually predict. It all depends. Like for instance, a person may not be himself familiar with it or uncomfortable with handling especially older people handling
Correct.
into the computers or any of these devices. But they can always, what I have discovered is they ask their grandchildren or their children or somebody known to them to find out about this. And there's always someone around. So therefore, to assume that something can happen or won't happen because a certain number of users is only lawyers or predominantly lawyers, or we are able to get to lawyers whom we see, would be an incorrect assumption. The second part is, of course, stemming from this, is that how much can we? I think the sky is the limit. But at the same time, as to whether how much optimally would it cut the footfalls or minimize people going, is $1 million question, because there are cultural issues. After all, when someone engages a lawyer, he or she would like to visit him, brief him or her, and then he or she feels comfortable when she sees him in flesh and blood perform in the court, especially on important occasions. So a mere website won't do. Even a streaming of court proceedings may not do, because after all, the lawyer's responsibility in that sense, if the client is around, he or she may feel that the lawyer will be more under a greater obligation to press the case, etc. Now, as far as giving answers to questions like when is this likely to get over, I don't know how to answer that. All that you can say is that whether you put it out on websites or not, that these are the various steps. Now,
Steps.
you do have statistics. Delhi High Court was the first to come out with the annual report in 2006, and these annual reports actually put out the statistics in terms of what is pending, what was disposed of, and from 2008 or 2009, it has gone to a level of sophistication. We have been even able to calculate what is the per minute time per listing, the cost to a public exchequer, and how much time is available to each judge for each case for the entire year, depending on the number of cases listed and so on. So this kind of statistical exercise has been carried on. So, but still, that will not give you an accurate picture about a particular case, because there are many variables. So I think it's a very difficult question. Some people are lucky; their cases are decided within few months, or maybe in 2 hearings. But some people get caught up in the system. So websites per se will give you some information statistically, but that's cold comfort for a person who enters the court and doesn't know when he'll get out of it, right?
Correct. Correct. So without putting the numbers, maybe like how you said, sir, step 1, step 2, you're at step 2. There are 3 more steps till this case is finalized. So maybe that
so
may
this kind
give
of
some
things can
comfort.
be put in. These kind of things can be put in, and in fact they are. For instance, there are like you have levels. These are these jurisdictions, and then in this jurisdiction you can proceed in this manner. But you are right that there's always scope for improvement. This is where, you know, there has to be more granular detail about what can be put in and what is lacking. Probably this kind of report or a further endeavor can, you know, come out with
Sure.
that.
Absolutely, sir. So, Professor Sharma, a question for you. This is a very emerging field in India, and we could not find any study similar to ours in India. So, how do you see this field developing? What are the next set of questions at the interface of design thinking, UI, UX, and the legal system, the law and justice system? What would you, your crystal ball gazing, what would it look like in 5 years from now, 10 years from now? You're on mute, ma'am.
The ideal would be that the user has a litigation that he wishes to put across. He is able to interface digitally onto the website or app or whatever the device is, and he is able to navigate through the entire system on his own. Of course, like the lawyer is there to help and everything, but the whole idea is that he gets a feeling of self-sufficiency while he's interacting with the judicial system. So it doesn't matter what the medium is. It could be a website, it could be an app, it could be video conferencing. The whole idea is that the user is coming with an issue at hand and he wants a resolution. And the judicial system, the digital judicial system is providing it through various means, and he is resolving the problem. Even if it delays, I mean, in terms of time, um, if the final answer is being delayed by years, he is not angry or he's not dissatisfied with the system. I think if the digital system is able to help with that kind of emotions in the user, I think it would be a big success.
Right. That's a very powerful statement, to deal with emotions of litigants systemically. Uh, um, I think we're coming to the end of the panel discussion, and thank you so much for your comments, Anisha Sharma. Justice Bhatt, last remarks from you. Thank you so much for making time and your comments. Closing remarks, sir, from your side.
I didn't expect that. uh, it's it's been very a very nice discussion. And only with this one more piece of information: most websites and court documents are not OCR compatible. So that will pose a big problem because we don't have the resources to have text. I mean, you not in that digital form, which is, as Professor Sharma said, intuitively people can go and search. So I assume that when you do a search, you will have to use, you know, tools like scrappers, etc. So that perhaps we don't have, and then to go from image to, you know, text is going to be another story. Therefore, as things stand, I think in the near foreseeable future, things would be as they are. But then this kind of effort, studying websites, coming out with report will always be is always welcome, because what the user or the litigant or the lawyer sees, we get to see what they see, and that should help the courts and especially court administrations to devise more services, design the bring about more efficiency in the design of these websites. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Justice Bhatt. Thank you, Professor Sharma. And I'll now hand this over to Leah to continue.
That was a great panel discussion, very enlightening. Thanks a lot to both of our panelists. I'd now like to request Justice Bhatt to formally launch our report. So you have to click on that PPT. Thanks a lot. I'll now hand over to Nomesh to give the vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you, Leah. I think the first thing would be a big thanks to Justice Bhatt for sparing his valuable time and launching the report. This really gives us a lot of encouragement as we go ahead and carry our work at the Center of Excellence. I would also like to thank Justice Gautam Patel of the Bombay High Court, whose remarks seeded the idea of conducting such an evaluation. Many thanks to Professor Rao for providing all support to the center, whatever we have asked for, including taking a very proactive role in our emerging collaboration with the NLU Delhi. We really look forward to that. I would like to thank Surya for moderating the panel, Leah for hosting this, and Soham Ghosh, our project manager, who's been tirelessly coordinating with all stakeholders concerned and making it happen. Thanks are due once again to our students who have worked on it. I think all that we do at IIT has a big imprint and contribution from student side. So Mansi, Jaimin, and all the other associates at the Dutch Society who have helped to put this report together. Before we conclude, of course, a big thanks to all the audience for sparing time, at not a very friendly time, I guess, evening time, and coming for the event. I would also like to convey about the ongoing and upcoming projects at the Center of Excellence. So as we speak, there is one project going on that is looking at case flow management. Specifically, now we have identified in a consultation with a retired Supreme Court judge, focusing on some specific aspects, and we do hope that we'll be able to get the support of the Delhi High Court and corresponding courts to take that forward. Our aspiration is that the findings actually make it all the way and they are able to contribute and make some difference somewhere. We are about to start another project, which the case flow management project looks at the service provider, not service provider, let's say, but the judicial side, helping the courts per se. But there is another project that will be ongoing soon, which will help the citizens in trying to engage and trying to make decisions about filing cases and about possible decisions and so on and so forth. We are trying to develop an assistant for common people based on artificial intelligence. Additionally, we are working on smaller studies that look at specific aspects of the judicial system, such as check bounce cases, which I presume is clogging up quite a bit of time, and there can possibly be better technological solutions to handle them. So apart from that, there are other events and other research projects and studies. We're always open to working with all stakeholders that are concerned here, ranging from the courts to practitioners to academic institutions. We look forward to your guidance and your support, Justice Bhatt, as we carry our journey in doing whatever we can, little bit, for the law and justice system of our country. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for sparing the time.